this time, we'll begin our Stevens Plantation Improvement Project DSD Governing Board meeting for Thursday, February 11th. We'd like to call this meeting to order, and we'll begin with a call of the roll. Madam Clerk.
Chairman Blackwell.
Here.
Vice Chairman Trace.
Here.
Member Matheny.
Here.
Member Cooper.
Here.
Member Askew.
Here.
Madam Clerk, if you'll read the first resolution.
Resolution number 2021-001R, a resolution of the Board of the Stevens Plantation Improvement. I'm sorry. Resolution of the Board of the Stevens Plantation Improvement Project Dependent Special District approving and accepting an agreement to sell Tract 6 and Tract 8-8 Stevens Plantation Corporate Campus, approximately 5.5 acres, to Real Properties to Rimrock Companies LLC for $825,000, and authorizing the chairman or in his absence the vice chairman to execute the agreement and all documents necessary to complete the sale.
And Mr. Chair, maybe I think I'll start this, and then you're aware of Veronica Malolis and Ben Crosby, the DSD's listing agents, are present, so they can help with regard to this. First of all, we want to apologize to you for the somewhat changing information that was provided on this item, or the lack of information. We've been working very hard to try to get this in front of the board tonight for an approval, because, as you know, we want to strike while the iron is hot, so to speak. Just by a little bit more history on it, as you will recall, the resolution tonight is for 6 and 8A. You have previously talked with a potential buyer with regard to 8A, and we were continuing to negotiate with them with regard to 8A. After much discussion related to the release of the CDDA bonds, as well as some other reevaluations, the prospective buyer that the board was talking to and we were talking to with regard to 8A made a counter offer to be considered by the board. As we were working through that, just by way of information, that counter offer for 8A was $492,000 for 8A alone, with that buyer absorbing the A bonds. While we were working for that, Mrs. Malolis and Mr. Crosby received a letter of intent from Rimrock Properties to not only buy 8A, but also to buy Tract 6. And the offer was for $825,000. Obviously, as staff to the DSD and our listing agent, we felt it was a much better opportunity for the district to try to sell both Tract 6 and 8A for a price that, on a per acre price, was actually higher than the $492,000 that was offered by the other prospective buyer. So before you tonight is the resolution to approve the sale of 6 and 8A, which is approximately 5.5 acres, to Rimrock Properties. And Ms. Malolis and Mr. Crosby may be able to address this, but we understand the intended uses for an assisted living facility. Again, the purchase price is $825,000. The buyer will absorb the A bond, so there's no need to go back to the bondholders to ask for approval with regard to whether the bonds would be released. There is a 90-day due diligence period, and the buyer has requested an additional period of 90 days with the right to have 3 extensions of that day in the event that they are diligently pursuing final permitting for the project. The slide in front of you, the slide tracks their LOI, and it has a deposit amount of $10,000 with a 30 days to close after the permitting period. We have provided to you, and we apologize, we emailed it to you earlier today, and I think you have a copy in front of you. We have prepared a proposed contract that tracks this thing. However, there's some counter responses or offers that we would make. Most particularly because whenever we've had a deal where there's been whenever we've had a deal where a buyer has requested, in addition to a due diligence period, they've requested a permitting period, we have been obtaining additional deposit money after the due diligence period and as they went into the permitting period. We also felt that $10,000 was a small deposit on an too small deposit on an $825,000 purchase and not consistent with prior agreements approved by the DSD. So the counter response to it was that the deposit would be $25,000 as an initial deposit, and then after the due diligence period, an additional deposit of another $50,000 for a total deposit of $75,000 when they enter into the permitting period. Additionally, they've asked for 2 extensions for the permitting period. We felt 2 might be a little, I'm sorry, they asked for 3 extensions in the permitting period. We wanted to accommodate them because they are obviously working on a project that involves a unified work with the, off of 2 lots to be able to build the development. They had asked for some other issues related to some easements are on there, and they withdrew those from their LOI. But we do think that that might require them a little bit more time to work through the permitting piece. So instead of 3 additional 30-day periods on the extensions of the permitting period, we thought that 2 would be more appropriate, and that's how it is. So the proposal in front of you then that we'd ask that the board approve would be to sell the property to Rimrock Properties, Tract 6 and 8A, for a total purchase price of $825,000. The due diligence period would be 90 days. The permitting period would also be 90 days with 2 opportunities to extend. The deposit would be $25,000 as an initial deposit and an additional $50,000 deposit upon expiration of the due diligence period. And the, again, the intended use is an assisted living facility for this 5.5 acres. As an aside, this all came up fairly quickly. Obviously, when we received this offer from Rimrock, which is in excess of the other offer that was in, we talked to Mr. Malolis about that, and from a staffing perspective, we reached out to the other buyer and told them what was going on. They extended an offer to the DSD to acquire tracks 4 and 5, which are the tracks that are still technically under contract with Madison Grove. We had been advised by Madison Grove that they did not, and remember, Madison Grove was the contract that was contingent upon the tax credit financing through the state. We had been advised a couple weeks ago that they had not obtained the necessary points to get them into the top 3 to be one of those projects in the state, and we understood that at that time, that they would be backing out of that contract. Prior to this meeting, I did reach out to them to confirm that was the case, and it's a good thing I did, because they advised me that they are challenging the points that were awarded through the review process, and technically they're still on the contract till June. So even though the other buyer has been great to work with, they've been very reasonable, however, because of this competing agreement from Rimrock, which we obviously believe is better for the DSD, and the fact that that other contract from Madison Grove is still in place and at a considerably higher amount than they were offering for 4 and 5. Well, unfortunately, we do not think that the DSD can enter into an agreement with that, obviously. So I just bring that up as additional information. Again, as the broker and the buyer for that, they've been good to work with, and they've been flexible. However, we do feel this is a much better deal for the DSD, as well as we always have to remember the bondholders watch this, and the additional monies obviously in the purchase price for not only this parcel but for the addition of track 6 and then possibly for 4 and 5 outweigh the offer from that buyer. So again, with that, we'd ask that if you have any questions, I'm happy to answer them. Again, Mrs. Malolis and Mr. Crosby here, they can talk more about the use, I believe. I don't think there's a representative of the buyer here, no, but they have talked to the brokers and they are aware of it.
Ms. Malalos, Mr. Crosby, would either of you like to speak?
Good evening. Veronica Malalas, one of your listing brokers for DSD, and Mr. Ben Crosby is also here. If you recall, Rimrock Companies actually put an offer in to 6 and 8A many months ago, pre-COVID. And we were working through a lot of the issues, but they went dark for a few months. In other words, they did not respond back, and I'm assuming that it was because of some issues related to COVID. And just fairly recently, they came back to the table with an offer. We worked through some of the details, and so they came up with 6 and 8A offer. We believe that it is a very competitive and well-priced offer, considering the history of the value of every property that we sold in corporate campus. And so we do agree with staff recommendation to approve.
Do we have anyone in the audience that, or online that is has asked to speak to this issue? If not, we'll take any questions or discussion from council. Councilmember Matheny.
Thank you. Can you go back to the graphic that shows all the tracks on it?
I'm not doing it. Very good.
Okay, I just wanted to kind of see that. So did you say that these Rimrock is interested in 4 and 5 as well?
No. The other buyer that was interested in 8A is interested in 4 and 5 at a very, very, frankly, very good price, good buyer price, I would suggest. It would work for the DSD, but it is a good value. It's just from a pricing perspective, and Veronica, remember that was the offer that we were thinking we were potentially bringing in front of you until we realized. Then we recognized that Madison Grove was still in play. That they had offered $560,000 for those 2 lots, which is about 4 acres, which to do the math is what, 115 or something thousand an acre maybe, and the going price has been 150,000 an acre, which is what the Rimrock deal is. So that's why. But they still are interested in it. They did leave the door open in the event that they would still talk to us, and I think it's mostly because that purchase price is extremely competitive from a buyer perspective.
And my recollection with Madison Grove, the last time they came and asked us for an extension, I believe the direction was we weren't giving them any more.
That's correct, but the way it worked is they were able to go through that one cycle, complete the cycle, and then close by June of this year, and I think it's either June 1st or June 21st of this year. So that contract is still in place, so they could waive the contingency and still close, or as they've indicated, they are going to try to get their ranking up higher so they can close. So we'll have to sit with that one. And remember, the Madison Grove folks did pay the taxes on track 5 for that part of that extension.
So this deal with Rimrock would include them paying the taxes as well?
Well, what would happen here, because of the timing of it all, we believe that the 2018 taxes are probably going to need to be paid before this project closes. So that, as we've done in the past, the balance of the outstanding taxes and the current taxes would be paid at the closing table.
Okay. Well, I like the amendments you're proposing that you had mentioned, the 2 extensions. I was curious what the extension duration was, and you finally said it at the end, it's 30 days.
Yeah, each one
Each one
is 30 days.
And then I like that, and then the additional money in the deal. So I liked all the proposed amendments.
And
Any
if I
other-
may add.
Go ahead.
Sorry, Mr. Mayor. I believe the counteroffer is 15 days to close after the approval, because I looked through the approach, which means it's not 30 days, it's 15.
Oh, you are correct. Thank you. Yes. Thank you, Veronica. Yes, the agreement we sent back has and what did make it, we reduced the closing period from 30 days to 15 days after the permitting period. That was another item,
good.
so that's part of the agreement. Thank you.
Any other question?
On the use side of things, so the 8A developers, that being the entity name, was doing light industrial. If Madison Grove ends up moving forward, we'll have kind of a assisted living facility next to a assisted living facility. So we'll have 2 competing uses right there, kind of leasing up at the same time. I know one's tax credit, one, I assume this one's not. Do we see that as an issue?
Well, actually, it's my understanding the Madison Grove project is not an assisted living facility. It's a senior housing project
Sorry.
with independent living, and it's just a senior housing apartment complex. So they wouldn't, I don't believe, if I'm wrong, I don't believe they would be competing uses in terms
Okay.
of,
I just want to make sure we talked about it, right? Because they still have the chance to move forward if they can win the appeal by, you said June or July?
and one of the other discussions, and Ms. Malois, she raised a good point when we were talking about that. If we were to pursue, as you said, light industrial with the other buyer, it would somewhat be a little, quote-unquote, awkward to have that light industrial right there on Tract 8A, which is kind of in the middle of the park. If it was going to be located anywhere, it would be much better located. I'm stealing your thunder, Sean.
Yes, and of course, our hope, and this was many years back, I would say, wow, about 3 or 4 years, that we had discussed or recommended a progressive care campus in corporate campus. And so now we have an opportunity because we have an independent living, we have fair market apartments, and an assisted living facility. And of course, we have medical that's across the street from
Yeah.
it. So it seems like a good synergy. And when there was an offer for 8A from both Rimrock for ALF and 8A developers, which was intended for light industrial, and when I'm envisioning the campus, it would seem to be a better plan to have an assisted living facility right next to the Fair Market small apartment complex that was bought by BSL Ventures.
Okay, and then in the contract that was put on the table, there's, they have to make application to the city for government approvals within X days of the effective date, or of the contract date. So do we know if they've agreed to a number on that, just to make sure that this progresses through?
Well, we haven't, and we were going to kind of, hopefully, we were going to ask the board to kind of leave that up to staff to put a number in. As long as it, in our view, it wouldn't exceed 30 days, if that's got. But we'd like to go as quick as possible with them. We haven't really had a chance to talk about that time frame with them.
And then what approvals are they wanting to get as their closing trigger? Is that full building approvals? Is that site work approvals?
No, we wrote it as in basically development entitled approvals and excluding building permit and site work approval, because we know that takes much longer, and obviously they like I said earlier, their intent, I believe, is to work over Tract 8A and 6, so they're going to have to do some structural things that might extend the building permit application process. So we have excluded that as part of the permitting thing. So basically, it would be, frankly, and they'll look into it when they get it. This is a permitted use in the corporate campus, so there's really not a lot of development approvals that need to be done. So I think they're going to get through that permitting process pretty good with that limitation that we put in there pretty quickly.
I had an opportunity to, Mr. Mayor, may I speak? I'm sorry.
Yes.
I had an opportunity to speak to the broker for the buyer early this morning at 8 o'clock, and I just wanted to confirm that she did receive a copy of the proposed PSA, proposed contract, and she said she had a chance to look it over. She doesn't see any issues with them. Of course, that's just glancing, and we're going to get formal response back from the buyer, but it seems that, everything was acceptable, at least verbally. We don't know that until we get it formally from their attorney.
Any other discussion?
And then are we taking any formal action on lots 4 and 5?
No, sir.
No.
Okay.
Could I entertain a motion?
Motion to approve.
We have a motion to approve Resolution 221001R. Do I have a second?
Second, and we're including the proposed amendments.
Right.
Yes.
Yes. With the proposed amendment, we have a motion from Member Askew, second from Member Matheny. Madam Clerk?
Councilmember Cooper,
Aye. Aye.
Councilmember Askew,
Aye.
Deputy Mayor Trace,
Aye.
Councilmember Matheny,
Aye.
Chairman Blackwell.
Aye.
Motion carries 5-0.
Excellent. Will you read the next item?
Update, discussion, and possible action as to Nolte Commercial Center improvements.
I turned it off. Turn this off too.
All right. Good afternoon. Abismal Abreu, Business Navigator for the City of St. Cloud. And I am here to discuss the, let me see if it works. Okay. There we go. So I'm here to discuss the Nolte commercial improvements. And I'll be doing today a bit of a background. I'll be supplying some recommendations and requesting direction from the DSD board at this moment. I'm going to start with the abandonment of easement. A bit of background. There's an easement on the north part of Lot 1 and Lot 2 of the Stevens Plantation Retail Center, as well as Lot 3, which is currently privately owned. It's a dental office. Inside of this easement, there's a utility box that belongs to CenturyLink. We have had discussion with CenturyLink, and they have identified this utility box as one of their immovable objects. So they're very reluctant on giving up that easement. And they have provided the city with an easement agreement that dates back to 2004, and as well as a sketch of the underground utilities infrastructure that's underneath that box. There's plenty of fiber optic cables and underground power cables as well. And they expressed that the city will have to pay and incur any relocation cost that will come if the city decides to move this box out of that site. It has been estimated that relocating that box and all the infrastructure that's on the ground will come to $300,000 to $600,000, depending on the location, due to the nature of the work. City staff held meetings to try to consider other options instead of this expensive process. And just to reiterate, that Lot 3 is privately owned, which means the city will, that part of the easement is not under consideration unless the owner of Lot 3 gives authorization to move forward and include them in the application. Next. So after discussion with CenturyLink and staff, we have a proposal here as a recommendation. If the DSD board decides to move forward with abandoning this easement, one possible way we can do this is by providing CenturyLink access through already established easement accesses that we have there from the entrance and the back road, the driveway access easement on the south of those property, and utilizing what's currently a 15-foot utility easement on the west side of the property. However, we're going to have to modify that easement to also add what's called an unimproved utility or unimproved access utility easement, so that CenturyLink truck could possibly drive up there. That means that no landscaping or no barriers can be put there, so that has to be unimproved and accessible for them. And as well as that, we also recommend, if the DSD decides, to reach out to the owners of Lot 3 to see if they would like to be included and give the city authorization to move forward and include their property in the application process as well. It's estimated to cost the city $1,200 to $1,300, depending on the surveyor evaluations. The sketch that I have there on the right, the red will be abandoned, while the green, it's what we'll be modifying to be an unimproved easement access there. And so we're requesting direction to see if the DSD board would like to move forward with this process and have the city take care of this easement, as well as if the DSD would like for the city to also contact the owners of Lot 3 to be included in the abandonment process. And the floor is yours. Asking for recommendations and direction on this request.
Do we have any questions from staff? Councilmember Matheny.
Thank you. So I assume the city attorney has reviewed the easement documents and concurs. Okay, that was question number one. Question number two is there a reason why the access to this utility can't just come directly off of Nolte?
There's sidewalks, there's a berm, there's landscaping, there's trees, and we'll have to modify, create a curb cut. We will also have to utilize the CDD's property and track W, so it's a little bit more complicated to use that instead of just utilizing what's already there. That's been easement codified and all that the city can use just by modifying the utility easement that we have there.
So you said you'd have to use the CDD property. What? I didn't follow that. What property is that?
So on the northwest, where the sidewalk on the sketch, it's there. There's a landscaping area where the sidewalk continues. All that belongs to the Stevens Plantation CDD, and so it's not property of the DSD per se. So we have to request permission from them for us to be able to, if we're able to have an access through there, to have an easement as well, create an easement on their property, so they can, so CenturyLink can pass their trucks there, which is already is a sidewalk, which creates problems with pedestrians and all that.
I mean, driveways and sidewalks cross all the time. I don't really think that's a big issue, but I mean, that's just kind of the obvious when you're looking at it, but I don't know the topography over there. But I guess I brought this whole thing up because it seemed like lots 1 and 2 would be more desirable if we got rid of this access easement that runs through it. I mean, if lot number 3 wanted to participate, that's fine, but they've already purchased it. You know, they can vacate that, you know,
Yeah.
if they so desire. I was really more concerned about lots 1 and 2. And you're saying this $1,300 estimated cost, that includes improving the access easement?
Yes, that will include, that is the price of the surveying cost. We'll have to get official documents, and we'll have to hire a city surveyor to get us the surveys. One, to add the easement, the other one's to identify the easement that we will be abandoning. And then the city cost for the abandonment of easement application, those were not taken into account into this cost, but they'll be waived by the city as the applicant.
And that's not construction?
There will be no construction. We will just put in the easements.
I thought you said you had to improve it.
What I mean by improving the utility easement is right now it's just an utility easement, so we will be adding an unimproved access easement to it, which means it's just identifying that as a road instead of just solely an utility easement for underground utilities to go through.
Well, I guess I'd like to hear Ms. Malalos's thoughts on it. Is it a worthwhile endeavor of $2,000 of cost to vacate those easements? I mean, to me, I just feel like it's anybody that's looking to buy that property, that's like a hindrance to them to see like it's chopped. If it doesn't feel like it's gonna have a return on value, then.
Mr. Crosby?
Good evening, Ben Crosby. Yes, we have had multiple prospects who have walked away because of the easement that exists, so we think for this amount of money, it would be well worth the effort. And maybe I can clarify, I think what's being said is what you see in green right now is basically grass, and it would, for all practical purposes, be left that way, and the CenturyLink trucks would just drive on that grass up to their box.
Sure, I get
So
that. I thought he
very
said,
simple.
I thought he said improve it. That's why I was questioning, did that include all the costs? But, yeah, if it's just a paperwork issue, to me, I just thought it makes the lots a lot more marketable and desirable. Perfect.
And Deputy City Manager Veronica just wanted me to reiterate that when we add this, if that's the direction that the DSD board would like to move forward, when we add this unimproved access easement, that will mean that nothing can go on top of it. It has to be clear, which means the landscaping that's required under the PUD will have to be moved further inward. So just as well, just take that into consideration, a fact that has to be taken into account.
Any other questions?
No?
Any other questions?
I'm good.
Well, I'd like to move forward. I mean, I don't think they need a motion. I think they're just wanting direction. I mean, I'd like to move forward with abandoning that access easement that cuts through the middle of lots 1 and 2.
Do all we need of that is just an agreement?
Yeah, we were looking for direction to move forward, and this to complete the process as has been explained to you today, so.
Is there anyone objecting to moving forward?
I'm sorry, I have one other question. Whatever happened with that whole community joint use sign that was supposed to go up? You know, at one point we
That-
talked about,
That will be my next item.
okay, well, I didn't know if that needed to be in lots 1 and 2. I'll wait for your next item.
We have
I
consensus?
think you got a green light on that to move forward.
Awesome. All right, second item I would like to bring forward for direction will be the plaza signage. Bit of background, Ordinance 2013-68 created the Stephen Plantation PUD, and under section 6.6.10, right now it says that every out parcel in the Stephen Plantation Retail Center is entitled to have its own monument sign. That's when it was just one big lot. So we have since then platted and we have created multiple lots in there. Some of them are fronting Nolte Road, some of them are on the back, which means the lots on the back will not have the required, their signage fronting Nolte Road. And while lots 1, 2, and 3 will have that ability. Lot number 3 currently has a dental office with its own sign. And DSD has recommended or instructed the city staff to look for possible solutions for this, and one of them was the plaza signage. So we are recommending the addition of a sign easement on lot 1 for the location of the plaza sign. If you look at the graphic that we have there, the black square identifies the approximate location of where the easement will be placed for the plaza sign. And this will require that we amend that Stephen Plantation PUD to scratch off that language that says that every out parcel will have the right to have its own freestanding monument sign, and then instead create a section just to have a plaza sign for all the lots. This will be an approximate cost of $500. Again, we're just going to be adding an easement that will cost the city just surveying fees. While fees waived by the city will be for the PUD amendment process as well as the public hearing fees, which I have detailed in your staff report there, that will cost around $3,600 that will be waived by the city. And we're just requesting direction on if we'd like to move forward with this proposed recommendation.
Do we have any questions or discussion? Councilman Trace?
On one of the earlier exhibits, for the thing you just went over, it shows a 20-foot greenway reserve. Would we be able to put the multi-tenant sign in that greenway reserve?
We'll have to respect that there, so we'll have to be at least 21 feet off of that.
Okay, because it'll look a lot different being that far back from the road.
Correct, and as it's written right now, the proposed amendment will already require 10 feet away from the property line, so we'll just be extending it below that greenway as well.
And then does lot 6 and 7, do they get any signage out on the road as well?
The plaza sign
Plaza sign.
will include them as well. I believe they haven't developed yet, so we have to act fast before they start.
Okay, so lots 1, 2, 4, 5, 6, and 7 will all have signage rights on there?
It will be applicable to them as well. By the time that they come, once we start this process, the time that they come for their building permit for their signage, they will have to adhere by the amended language, so we'll include the plaza sign.
Okay.
Why didn't this get started earlier?
the directions were given prior COVID, and we were working along with the individuals or the applicants that are in contract with Lot 2. I don't know if you remember that they had the desire to have an extra entrance from Nolte, and just with working with them and the way the PUD is written right now, by adding that entrance in Nolte, we didn't have to do any changes to the PUD because as the PUD is written, any entrance on Nolte has the ability to have its own sign on it. However, that hasn't happened yet. So we had to put our project on hold to see what was going to happen with the entrance. And now that we have in clear direction that we need to move forward with this plaza sign, so we have an alternative instead of using the entrance that they were proposing. Because that would have included the easement for the sign already as well.
Do you have any other questions?
Well, it just looks like, to me, it's haphazard at the end instead of progressed as we were going through and catching all of the dot the i's and cross the t's, and we missed a lot of dotting and crossing. I think you'll admit that. I think we're gone way too far down the road now, and now we've got to hurry up and get it done. Correct? Pretty close?
It's a lot of variables that we
Yeah.
have to take into account, but Lot 2 is currently on the contract, so we have to pay attention to that as well, since the signage easement is not presently under their contract. So now we have to deal with Lot 1 as the only alternative, since that entrance there fell through.
The only problem, I keep seeing it, it's money that just keeps coming and paying the city and pay and pay and pay. You know, the citizens are paying for this, and it just keeps coming. We're not gonna get any money back. This is gonna put more money into the kitty, and the bondsman's gonna get it all, but we're not gonna get a penny. This is after the fact. We couldn't have done this earlier and gotten this placed and charged each one of these properties owners?
Yeah, like I mentioned earlier, we were working with the owners of Lot 2 there, and that just didn't work out for us.
Mr. Sturgeon, would you like to speak to this?
No, I just want to reemphasize, again, nobody on this council had anything to do with this DSD or any of these properties. So, you know, we're cleaning up a mess, Mr. Cooper. And, you know, we've been very diligent, you know, trying to get this property sold in the last 3 years. And also, you know, we had to work with that Lot 2 who was under contract before we moved forward with this sign easement. So just want to make that clear that, you know, we've done our due diligence.
Well, I certainly think this is something we need to approve and act on. Are there any objections?
Yes.
Any question?
Mr. Trace?
Who's paying for the sign?
We are.
No.
Who's paying for the sign?
That'll be figured into the,
I believe that it's just changing the ordinance, so whoever develops will have to adhere by those development standards that we set.
If I may make a suggestion on it, one of the ways to address it is there is a commercial property owners association for this that was created and is in place. So we could work with the actual location of the sign, where it would be, being dedicated to the association, and then the association would be the one that would be responsible for maintaining it, and then splitting the cost among those owners of property that would ultimately benefit from the signage. And that's how we envisioned it would work. So basically it would be a development sign controlled by the Property Owners Association, the Commercial Property Owners Association.
well, I think we would approve that as long as that caveat's certainly carried out.
Well, and I don't think staff was suggesting that the city was going to, or the DSD was going to construct a sign or manage it. We certainly
Right.
don't.
Okay, I feel better. Thank you.
Good.
So you had a green light on that.
Thank you. And last, my final item. And lastly, my last update will be on the sidewalk reconfiguration. The DSD requested that the city works on straightening the sidewalk located there on the northwest side of Lot 1. If you see on the top of that graphic there. Next slide, please. And these are the findings I'll be bringing forward for your considerations, which is the estimated cost of straightening the sidewalk will be $45,000 to $50,000 based on historical cost. And we have detailed them there for you for reference, which will range from engineering to relocation of street lighting, trees, concrete work, and lowering that berm that's there. Next slide, please. We have few unknowns as far as if there's adequate slope. That will require some guardrails to be installed if we do straighten that sidewalk. And there's also some underground power ducts that could be located that it might be problematic at the time we start digging. So those are unknown factors that we have to take into account if they become a problem. And the city staff is recommending that we do not move forward with this project. And we're asking for direction to see what the DSD board would like to do.
I agree with that recommendation.
I agree wholeheartedly.
Agree.
Any objections?
No.
You have unanimous agreement that we not move forward on that unfunded cost.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. Have a good one.
Madam Clerk, will you read the next item?
Resolution number 2021-002R, a resolution of the Board of Stevens Plantation Improvement Project Dependent Special District approving and accepting a third amendment to certain agreement to sell Lot 2 of the Nolte Road Commercial Park for Stevens Plantation, approximately 1.52 acres of real property to Compton Builders, Inc., dated November 18, 2019, and authorizing the chairman or in his absence, the vice chairman to execute the third amendment and all documents necessary to complete the sale.
Okay.
And, Mr. Chairman, I think I'll run lead on this one again also. And again, Mrs. Malolos and Mr. Crosby are here to address their information they have with regard to the prospective buyer. As you know, this is Lot 2. We don't have the map, but we're just looking at it. So hang on. Just leave it. You can pull the map up if you like. Just leave. But anyway, this is the third amendment to this November 18th contract that the DSD entered into with Compton Builders. The Lot 2 is approximately 1.52 acres, and you need to go to the corporate camp, to the commercial site. And in the original agreement for Lot 2, there were two sellers' conditions as part of the closing. The first was water, sewer, and electric utility connections to the east or south boundary line of the property, and an internal drive service connecting drive aisle on the property. The contract had a time for completion of those of October. That has been delayed, and so what this amendment does is it extends the completion date for those seller items. As we understand it, the only one that is left is the internal drive, which we talked about in the city council meeting. And the time to complete those would be extended until March 15th of this year, and then the closing date would be extended to a set date of April 1st of 2021 to close on this property. Essentially that's what this amendment does, and it allows for the final completion of these seller contingencies. Ms. Malolos did talk to the buyer, and this was a question that was asked at the city council meeting about whether the buyer was still wanted that internal drive, and we confirmed that the prospective buyer for Lot 2 does want that internal drive. Of the perspective that the DSD board might remember that you did tender an offer, or at least accept an offer to sell Lot 5 to the same buyer. However, they have not at this point proceeded with that offer that was approved by the DSD board, so we do not have a signed contract on that, but it's our understanding that this same buyer is interested in Lot 5, remains interested in Lot 5. So the drive is a condition of the contract for Lot 2, and the staff's recommendation is that this amendment be approved to allow more time for that to be completed.
Mr. Sturgeon.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. I just want to add that we talked to Cathcart, who would be putting the driveway in, and they're going to rearrange their schedule to meet the March 15th deadline, so we can still close by April 1st. That's on the consent agenda for the council meeting later this evening.
Thank you. Ms. Malalos, are you wanting to speak to this item?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I spoke to Mr. Compton as late as yesterday, and he did confirm that he will close on April 1st, and he was in general agreement with this amendment. Thank you.
Thank you. Do we have any discussion or motion by council? Councilmember Trace.
So the site plan that was sent over is what he's planning on the property? I remember we talked about it at one point because there was the drive-through in the back, but this is still the same layout?
I'm not sure what site plan you're looking at, Mr. Trace, I'm sorry.
Compton Builders, 10,100 square foot of total building for parcel 2.
Can we put on the overhead, please? Maybe.
Waiting on Jay.
So it's hard to see some of the writing on the left side, but it shows that drive aisle coming in and the curb cut coming in and out of the property, but it shows that drive aisle splitting the property line. So I didn't know if that was something that was agreed to in the purchase contract from
Well, that was,
2019?
as you might recall, there was discussion with the buyer about proceeding with the, another amendment to the PUD other than what you were just discussing to address that access point from Nolte Road. The DSD board specifically instructed the buyer at the time that that was okay with them. However, that would be completely under the responsibility of the buyer to get that done. And to date, we have not received any information on that.
I mean, so we don't know if that's still the plan or not?
Mr. Compton has the intent to apply for the PUD amendment. However, he has not done so, and I did advise him that that is now not part of his due diligence period, and that we proceed to closing as long as the internal drive is completed.
Okay, as long as our commitments are complete as the DSD.
I'm
Our,
sorry.
our commitments of doing the drive aisle and the utilities.
Yes,
yes.
that's
Okay.
what she's referring to.
There's no other contingency because I don't, if he wants to build that, we need some, as the owners of parcel 1, we need some money in escrow or something to be able to hold him accountable for building that drive aisle if it's going to be half on a different parcel and have money in escrow or
Right,
something, some sort of commitment.
He is not, with that proposed plan that's on the screen, he would have to get permission from the adjacent property owner, which is the DSD currently, or if it was sold between now and then, there would have to be a joint venture to address this plan. So, and what I think Mrs. Lois is saying is that he understands that, he's ready to deal with that. If he has to deal with it post-closing, he will deal with it post-closing.
Okay, because I don't even remember when we spoke about this, but I haven't seen it come through, right? So is the
Right.
commitment still there to proceed with this property and do this?
We don't know. I think he's taking that on himself. He might do it in the future, he might not. He's not tying it to my understanding the buyer is not tying it to this sale of Lot 2.
Okay, because we're about to stick a multi-tenant sign right at the corner of that, so it's either going to happen or it's not. So I think as long as there's nothing that parcel 2 can do to block that multi-tenant sign.
Right, that's correct. And we
Okay.
may have to work through that issue right now, but we were frankly, we were hopeful that he would have gone through the process, the buyer would have gone through the process a lot more, but at this point, I think the DSD needs to try to move forward and sell as many of these lots as we can and address it.
Yeah, I just don't want to griping later of, well, I can't do my site plan anymore because it didn't, he didn't adhere to the process. So that's fine. What is our construction completion date? I know we have that, the amendment with Cathcart, but what do we have as the actual contractual date for them to be done?
Bill, do you know?
Leslie, if they said they'd be done by the 15th, correct? They said the driveway would be completed by March 15th,
March
2021.
15th, and that's FDEP clearance on the water and sewer and everything?
It's my understanding,
Utilities are done.
That's all that's been done. The
That
plans.
we already have
all the
It's just the
plans and
driveway, Mr.
permitting have
Tracy.
all
Okay.
been done.
All right, sounds good.
Any other discussion? Is there anyone in the audience like to speak to this item? If not, can I entertain a motion?
Motion to approve.
Have a motion from Mr. Askew. I'll second. Madam Clerk, will you call the roll?
Member Askew?
Aye.
Vice Chair Trace?
Aye.
Member Matheny?
Aye.
Member Cooper?
Aye.
Chair Blackwell?
Aye.
Motion carries 5-0.
With that, we will be adjourned, and we'll take, 5-minute break, guys.
8 minutes.